Welcome back to Women's Splain. Today we're continuing our two-part series on the glass cliff and why all the women are leaving Goldman.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit on one of our past episodes about this phenomenon that we call glass cliff, rooted in academic research and a lot of currently what's happening with a lot of these companies. We mentioned Goldman. We were talking about Beth Hammock, who was a really senior woman at Goldman. She's been there for, I think, like 30 years. She was supposed to be the CFO. Didn't happen. And then she quit because there was, nothing for her in terms of the next role. And when we were recording that episode, we talked a little bit about Stephanie Cohen as well, who was also a really senior exec at Goldman. She ran platform solutions. And a few weeks ago, she also left Goldman. Coincidence? I think not.
I know. Sometimes I think we kind of manifest it because I swear to God, we recorded our episode and she left on Monday. But I know, and same thing. And actually over the past few years, a significant portion of Goldman's female leaders across the investment banking and trading divisions have left. It's been just this mass exodus in Goldman. Steph Cohen being probably like the most high profile and most recent. Yep. She was head of their platform solutions. She's now taking a job at Cloudflare. And she was also put on the head of platform solutions, which is effectively everything but banking and trading, when Goldman was having so many issues across their commercial banking division, across Marcus, across their private equity and venture capital investment division. And so her effectively being coined either the savior or the blamer, we can probably say either, for all of the issues at Goldman, and then not being promoted into really C-suite management is really representative of just the issue within that company and also kind of in the grander landscape, especially right now that we're in a financial downturn. And I think, generally this kind of glass cliff idea has been very preeminent. Like Boeing is the most recent, I think, another large example of a company that's having obviously a ton of issues. And they have a new female CEO now.
Yep. And with Boeing, I think it was a week ago, late March, when the CEO stepped down. Of course, there's a ton of issues right now with the 737 operations, safety. So when he stepped down, this woman, she is third generation Boeing, so she knows the company really, really well. Her name is also I believe Stephanie Pope. So she'll be taking over in the coming months. Also, there are a lot of other divisions within Boeing that also promoted female leaders. I mentioned 737, like that specific program is now run by a woman. The safety department also run by a woman, quality control and assurance. So I feel like it definitely is, something that we are seeing right now, not just in financial services, but also, any other company.
Yeah, absolutely. And this idea has been around for a while too. I mean, the CEO of Hewlett Packard, she was actually HP was having a ton of issues losing market share, et cetera, around 2005. And she was promoted as the first female CEO there. And put onto kind of that class cliff. She ended up doing very well, and she had a long tenure as CEO. But I think we've also mentioned this in our previous episodes, but on average, female CEOs have a much shorter length of tenure than men for many reasons. One of them is being often placed in a disastrous scenario. And also, it's so difficult to being like a first or initial female leader in a company that's already kind of going through a downturn. The rest of the C-suite and the rest of the leaders within the company are usually also not replaced because it makes it look like a disaster. And those leaders that have been around for a long time are often entrenched in bad habits and are unable to change or move. And so having a new CEO often doesn't necessarily completely change a company unless you're really willing and the leaders around them are really willing to listen. And so that's a really difficult thing too, especially a company with, long-term entrenched leaders. And I think you can see that at Goldman too, where this large exodus of women have left because there was just a lack of change. And like the men at the top are just unwilling to shift despite like the negative wins.
Yeah, and I know we were looking at like Goldman's Instagram
oh my God,
before this.
It's like so crazy.
And like the last like 10 posts are just like about women or like women talking about AI or whatever. But like I'm sure they're like, oh shit. Like,
they're like, oh yeah, let's find all of the freaking women at Goldman and put them
like
on Instagram.
5 women.
Literally. It feels like a college catalog when they have like their 5 diverse students at Harvard on the front.
Right.
And you're like, come on, guys, like just be like a little less obvious, you know? No, but it is true. And I think, but I will say maybe the positive effect of this, it seems like other financial institutions are promoting women more. It's like JP Morgan recently promoted women at the head of investment banking decision, a few others as well. And I feel like that may be taking a cue of they really want to keep their female leaders. And so maybe that's an upside of like Goldman having all these issues, losing obviously like some of their most valuable assets generally, and having that loss and the impact across their industry and organization. Like obviously both Steph Cohen and Beth Hammock have been there for 30 years. Goldman put a lot of money and time into them. And they were extremely influential and extremely valuable. They were appreciated and they left. So I think JP Morgan maybe had a moment of reflection of understanding they wanted to do the same thing.
Yeah, and just like on Steph Cohen as well, I believe she was on leave for a number of months, and then apparently she was going to come back, but then ended up just, you know, leaving for Cloudflare. So I wonder, like, if that had been a man and they were on leave, like, would that have happened? Maybe they would have, you know, made another role for that person if it were a man. It really begs a lot of question of like, is this happening because we're women and women are expected to fix problems and are, you know, ousted a lot easier just because they're women?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being on leave too, I mean, that's also odd. Like, I wonder what the circumstances around that were. Of like what drove, if it was her decision, like maybe she was like, I need a sabbatical, or if it was their decision, or both. Usually that's an indicator that you don't come back. I mean, I feel like sabbatical is usually what that is. But I mean, it would be interesting to know what the circumstances surrounding that are. No idea. Or maybe like it was a personal reason and maybe Goldman wasn't supportive of that and she wanted someone that was more supportive. You know, because I think about a lot of companies that have a significant number of women in the ranks are usually way more supportive around flexible work and personal issues, because women are like the caretakers in their home and often have to their work lives are way more taken over by ailing parents or children. So maybe that's also a good lesson for the industry of just, if you want to keep your female leaders, like you need to be a little more flexible.
And I feel like a lot of these big companies, especially in finance, you know, everyone's in the office 4 or 5 days a week, and there's not that much flexibility or room to be flexible with work-life balance. And like, especially if you're a mother with children, like that should be something that you should be able to do in terms of going home early or, you know, working from home. But I feel like a lot of these companies don't really have that kind of policy that's flexible.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think about companies that have had a lot of successful female leaders. Actually, one of them is Ritual. I was reading about them recently, which was founded by, like, you know, it's obviously like the vitamin company, founded by also a woman she founded when she was 4 months pregnant as well. Super impressive. She couldn't find a prenatal vitamin that she trusted. So she made her own at 4 months pregnant. So insane. And they're like doing incredibly well. They've grown a ton, and are like probably the most popular female vitamin on the market. That's like within kind of a D2C structure. And have actually generally increased the amount of women's habits and taking vitamins, which is fantastic. But she has talked really openly about parental leave. Like that was the first thing that she prioritized around, even when she was like a burning, growing early stage company, like gives 5 months of paid parental leave to all of her employees, and she has extremely high retention and a really high percentage of women. So I think, you know, obviously, and like parental leave even for men too is shown to be really important for childcare. So I think honestly, it's a time for maybe our industry and finance to have like a reflection around like maybe we need to adjust a little.
Right.
I want to retain the best talent.
Yeah. And like that'll only happen when you have women in the senior management position, because they understand, you know, what other women go through, and that's something that they are going to prioritize and emphasize.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think also like I think women at the top also have like they need to be advocating for this. I know like you know a lot more about this, but maybe talk a little bit about this, like the idea of queen bee or mean girl complex of, you know, female partners and female women with power.
Yeah, I feel like that is, I guess, the other side of what we've talked about, right? In terms of like women helping women, female empowerment, but also there's this idea that if you're a woman and you've gone through all the quote unquote hazing or, just regular life of being a woman in a male dominated industry, I feel like a lot of the times women at the top are not really helpful in terms of being the sponsor or pulling other women just because they've gone through it and they've survived it and they believe they're tough for that. So it definitely is interesting to kind of look at the other side, like, okay, like we should be helping other women, but there is a lot of research and just case studies of this not happening, which, as you mentioned, the queen bee effect. So I wonder, like, and we talked a little bit about this in part one, but I wonder if it's the reason for this is because since you are, kind of working through and assimilating yourself into more of the bro culture, if you lose some aspect of, your feminine side, and maybe that's, the reason why women tend to be at the top, I guess, like mean girl, quote unquote. But it's sad, but it's the truth and reality.
Yeah, I know, and it's obviously a lot of pressure. I mean, there's so few women who make it there. It's a lot of pressure and expectation for them to, one, make it there, two, maintain it in their position that's way more precarious, and then three, have all this pressure to promote other women. But the answer is, I think, a lot of times they women at the top, they feel so alone. They feel like they're barely scraping onto their position, that they can't even imagine another woman at the table, and feeling like they'll lose all their power and prestige if they like allow another woman to get there. And so sometimes they feel like, oh, like I can be the only one, there can only be one, which I can understand. And that can be like just a really challenging experience. So what does that mean? And it obviously is unfair to have all of this pressure on women, but the answer is more women is better for everyone. More women around, more women at the top will obviously also generally change that attitude around that there only can be one.
Yeah.
And so I hope that we can, foster more supportive environments for women generally, which can be extraordinarily challenging and difficult.
Yeah.
I know, one of the also like another idea of this is around networking too, and the answer is women struggle a lot with their network and expanding it in obviously a very different way than men. Is often like, a lot of times when you're at the top in like political games, it's like who you know, not what you know. And so I think it's also around that too, of like we need to find ways to like expand and help women.
Well, it's really difficult if networking occurs at they're at the golf course.
Yeah.
They're playing poker. And like, of course, like I'm sure women, could also enjoy those things, but typically they don't. And so they're just like not present at these events. So
yeah, and it's just also just de facto exclusionary because like there's assumptions that they wouldn't, right? So I mean, like I've even like tried to learn. I mean, I'm learning to play golf just because of that. Even though I mean, it's fine, like whatever. I like being, it's pretty and things, but like it's certainly not an activity I would choose if it didn't have like career benefits to me, and that's also just exclusionary and unfair. And it can also be exclusive for like honestly just non-white men or people like non-white wealthy men, in all honesty, that like didn't grow up with that access. And what hurts honestly our industries in America is excluding the best people kind of based on that, of like women and people of color who don't have the same level of access. And I honestly think, women need to be better maybe creating our own de facto exclusive circles, like even maybe there are activities we enjoy that men don't, that we can exclude them from. And in all honesty, like I think there are some like very good networking like organizations, like All Raise I think does a pretty good job. I love like their cohort program. I'm in chief as well. But I think it needs to be more expansive, more normal, and more encouraged generally. And I think it's really important too to find mentors and people who help you outside of your own firm.
Yeah.
Because I think honestly, having someone be able to like, you can really discuss the honest truth without political consequences is helpful.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like we've both spent a number of years in the industry, and something that I have been doing and something I've been finding helpful is, as you said, like building your network, just, talk to people in the industry. find something in common, be genuine, build those connections. And then, of course, like, it might not help you like right away, but down the line, you'll see someone if you're looking for another opportunity or, you know, starting something else. Really tap into those networks, I feel like, is something that like I wish I knew like earlier on, but an advice that I also want to, you know, tell our listeners and people that are interested in being in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like a continual process as well. And I've also seen like as we grow up in the industry and like obviously our networks are also growing up and becoming obviously higher in their careers, how beneficial it can be. And also that like, honestly, I would say 99% of the time people would love to be reached out to and like want to help you. I think that's a really shocking thing. Even if you don't have a specific reason, people are actually very helpful, especially other women. You know, like, so don't be afraid. I think it's something I tell myself a lot. Like, and honestly, if you're like very nervous about not having a reason, I think a good one is like if you watch for announcements, that's always a great way. Like if you watch someone close a deal, you can reach out to them and ask about it. Or if you're looking in an industry, they need help, it's really good. And also leverage your school network. Leverage LinkedIn. Like it's really, really helpful. And honestly, the only way that we're gonna like women are going to be able to continue to empower ourselves and like honestly make real change in the industry is if you know, we're way better together and not divided.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, leverage your connections, find something in common with them. We talked about like golf being like a specific type of activity, but like I don't know, like learn how to ski and you'll, you know, meet a ton of people on the slopes these days.
No, it's
like,
honestly so true. And also this is such a random piece of advice, but if you have good interest in your resume, it can be really helpful. Like, I have Taylor Swift on my resume as interest and it is a great conversation topic, okay, for all the women. Literally for the men too, okay? Like seriously, like men are like, oh, my wife, like I love Taylor Swift. I went to the concert. And you're like, literally everyone does. And and like, it's just a good way to kind of show your personality. Right. So just like a random tip.
Right, exactly. I have food blogging and like everyone loves food. Everyone loves restaurants.
Yes,
everyone loves New York City restaurants. So that's something that you can
I always talk about.
Exactly.
Like also like in New York, I mean, whenever I was interviewing, a big one talking about New York real estate. That's a great one. Everyone's talking about how to get a best apartment.
That's true.
It's a good evener. Everyone experiences it. It's very like, you know, everyone goes through it. But speaking of, I think the only way to really fight this glass cliff idea is, and honestly to like promote really more women to get to top leadership is to change the industry a little bit. And I'm hopefully, you know, I think we're seeing JPM having, you know, responding really well. And I think we are also seeing, you know, some other developments in the industry too.
Yeah. And I think a lot of what I've been seeing recently is also at the more junior level, hiring a lot more women and minorities. And then we talked a little bit about this last time, but really focusing on the mentorship and the growth and really pulling women up. And hopefully, you know, in the next 10, 20, whatever years, we'll definitely see a lot more women up top.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope that Goldman learned a lesson here. Yeah. I mean, I think that they're having such bad press right now, and they had such a large excess of these high value assets that I honestly really hope that they change their company and like really honestly promote women to the top as a president, CEO of the bank, which I've never had, as like a real C-suite member, people on their board, people with their hiring boards, and honestly change their policies so they can maintain these strong women that they obviously invest in from the beginning, and keep. And I hope this like kind of ricochets to the industry too.
Agreed.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for listening, guys. And love talking about the glass cliff today.
Yeah. Thanks all.
Bye.